actually the people I know. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I am multi-talented. I can actually keep an eye on the chat and talk to you about feedback at the same time. I'm in San Diego. I know a lot of you are from, yay, Ashley's from Indianapolis, woohoo. I know a lot of you are from the Los Angeles area, and I was actually, QLA was one of the last places I was before lockdown last year. We had a lovely trip to Los Angeles that day. And then I went to one more conference in February, and then that was it. So glad to be back. So Fabulous Feedback Faster is the name of our session. It is also Bitly, Fabulous Feedback Faster. So if you know the session title, you know the Bitly. They are the same. And I think that Bitly does reappear multiple times on several slides. So even if it goes away for a few minutes, don't panic, it's coming back. So yes, Myra, the app I'm talking about. Let me introduce myself and then I'll tell you about the app I'm talking about. So I am Jen Roberts. I teach 9th grade English at Point Loma High School in San Diego. Well, I still teach 9th grade English at Point Loma High School, even though I actually teach in the room at my house, whereas it is my office. So, but we have been entirely virtual here in San Diego Unified all year long. So it has been an entirely virtual experience for me. I'm kind of loving that actually at this point. It's kind of been kind of good for me. The commute is fantastic, you know, all those good things. Nationally board certified, Google for Education certified innovator. GHP stands for generally helpful person. If you need something, please reach out on Twitter, or you can also reach me on my blog, littentech.com. I respond to comments there too as well. So it's such a luxury to have these fabulous moderators who are handling all of the people who are coming and hitting that admit button for me. So I don't have to worry about that, because usually when I'm teaching, I'm like, admit, admit, admit. So glad to be able to do that. Okay, yes, Vicky knows the app. The app is mmhmm.app. Currently only available for Macintosh computers. So you have to have a Mac, and it has to be running Mojave or newer. So Mojave, Catalina, or now Big Sur. It's running one of those 3 operating systems. The Mac I had going into lockdown was too old. It was 8 years old. It was time for a new one anyway. So I used the as an excuse for upgrading my Mac, and I'm really glad I did, because I don't think I could have done completely virtual learning this long without it. The district laptop was not going to cut it. So if someone will ask again, somebody who joins us in a few minutes will be like, what is that thing that's putting her slides behind her head? So would one of you just please tell them in the chat so that they can move on with life, because it's very distracting to wonder how someone is doing something. So it's really cool. It allows me to change rooms. I can be anywhere in the world. I can be in my classroom, just like virtual backgrounds in Zoom. But I get a nice interface that makes it easier for me to change between them. I can put the slides over my shoulder. I can even put the slides full screen and put my head in the corner. And I can do somewhat crazy, really just neato factor things like, oh, where'd it go? Where'd it go? There's too many choices now. Make it rain. You know, it's always fun to make it rain, right? So I am loving that app. It's been allowed me to do some fun things with kids. So that's a good thing to have. Never underestimate the neato app. Neato factor. There you go. All right, so talking about Fabulous Feedback Faster, I want to reframe the way we sort of think about feedback. We think about feedback as the thing we do as teachers to tell kids how they're doing. But it's not just that. There's actually almost too many ways to give students feedback. It's actually, if you use all of these, it's overwhelming. Kids get freaked out. So we're going to cover sort of 4 options for you and remove the guilt of, like, as a teacher, I'm not doing enough to give my students feedback. I don't have enough time physically in the world to actually give all my students all the feedback that they actually need. So I leverage peer feedback. And yes, we are going to talk about teacher feedback, because that is the part that's going to save you time. So we'll probably spend the most of our time there today. We're also going to talk about options for whole class feedback, or ways you can give feedback to a whole class at once. And also that one down there in the corner, automatic feedback. If at any point you can't see my slides, and I know this one has some pretty small text on it, just let me know in the chat. I can switch to traditional screen sharing and stop using the map thing. It depends on the bandwidth you have available to you. So the host in this room told me that it looked okay from their perspective when we started, but if it's some reason not looking for you, let me know. I have my screen spotlighted if that helps. And if you're using something else, you might need to pin my video to be able to see it clearly. All right, so we're gonna look at all those types of feedback, kind of in that order. All right, so talking about peer feedback, first of all, you don't have to be, you're not the only one in the room, right? There's actually, part of my master's degree was on this. There's actually a lot of research that shows that feedback from multiple peers is more effective than feedback from a single teacher, right? So you as the teacher can tell the student, you need to add more dialogue to your narrative. But until 3 of their peers tell them the same thing, they don't believe you, right? They just want to be done and they think it's good enough and that kind of thing. And then they share it with their peers and their peers all say separately and anonymously, you need to add more dialogue. And then they go, oh, maybe I should add more dialogue. I'm like, I've been saying, but now they believe it. So one of the first ways I give peer feedback is with discussion questions. I ask my students to post their idea, go to Canvas, tell us what you think your character is about. And I know this one is super small. I'm really not even expecting anyone to read it, but trust me, that top one says, the character I'm creating is a professional chef. Something interesting about my character is that he has his own restaurant that is family owned. Although my character is like me because he loves to cook, he is also different than he has a family owned restaurant and is a professional chef. Something I want people to remember about Troy is his humor, a passion for cooking, and especially his Italian food. I like your character. I love that your superhero loves to cook. I like your character because I'm really hungry. I want him to cook me something. Right? So these are kids giving feedback to a kid about his planned character. But it also works when they don't do a great job. This is constructive feedback. This is a good concept for a hero, but I wonder, why do people hate him? Because he has different taste in music? I suggest you keep the same story, but tell a little bit more about what led the public to dislike him. Right? So now they're being critical friends. They're giving that kind of constructive feedback. You know, they're asking each other questions. They can do that. I don't need to do that. They can do that. So you can ask a discussion question in Google Classroom and do the same thing. I happen to do these in Canvas, but the same idea works. So what is your idea? What do you think you're going to write about? Let's put it out there. Let's see what people say. Let's see what suggestions they have for you. Works great. I teach 9th grade English. Did I mention that? So we do a lot of writing. The second way students give each other feedback is, one of the second ways I use is Socrative. Now, you may have heard of Socrative. It's been around for a long time. And you're probably used to using it for quizzes. Like, I'm going to make a quiz. Maybe you've even moved on. Maybe you don't use Socrative anymore. You use quizzes or you use Kahoot or you use one of those others. But Socrative still has one feature that I've never been able to find anywhere else duplicated. If you know another option, please let me know. I'm just interested, curious, always interested in new ideas. But Socrative has this short answer option where I'm just going to send out a quick question and the students are going to paste in something that they've probably already written somewhere else in their Google Doc or something like that. And then I have a button called Start Vote. And when I click Start Vote, please turn yellow. Yeah, no, too fast. Okay. When I click Start Vote, it sends everybody's answer back out to the whole class anonymously. Everyone gets to see what everybody else wrote. And the power of that is then I get to say, find the one that's better than yours. Find the one you wish you had written. And we do this with thesis statements. We do this with descriptive paragraphs. We do this with dialogue. We do this with any kind of writing where I want their writing to get better. It could be their hypothesis for a science project. It could be their explanation of how they solved a math problem. It could be almost anything. But when they do the writing and then they see everybody else's writing anonymously, and then they get to vote, which one's better than yours? Which one do you like more than yours? Even the kid who's quote unquote like the best writer in the class is going to find something in someone else's writing that they kind of wish they had done, right? Everybody sees that. And what happens is I get results. So this paragraph that they had written in their Google Doc and pasted into Socrative for me got voted up. And once it got voted up, we put it in a Google Doc again. Like I just put it in a big Google Doc in front of the class. And we started talking about what is good. What do we like about it? What's working in it? Great. Okay, we find 5 or 6, maybe 4 things that we really like about that example that they picked. They're invested. They picked it. And then I say, okay, based on the things we liked in this one, go revise yours. And they do very quickly. They get really right back because they have something concrete they can absolutely do to make their writing better. And then we paste it in again and we vote again, right? Students love this. They beg to do it. They see immediate and tangible results in their own writing. And they really, really like it. So this is a super popular technique. I have not found any other tool that does it. Socrative does it. All you need is the free version to do it, because it's just that single short answer question. All right, peer grade. Peer grade is no longer free, but I have, where do I have that link? Somewhere I have a link that I'll get you a 3-month trial. So stick around and get you 3 months of peer grade, which will get you through most of the rest of the school year, especially if you don't need it next week. So students hand in their work, and this is better for slightly longer pieces. It does, the first time you do it, I recommend doing it with short pieces. Socrative does not require student accounts. Students join Socrative by just going to the Socrative link, and they put in your room number. And that doesn't make them a member of your class or anything. It just lets them into your room temporarily. So my room number is 6867, and I just post that on the wall in my classroom. I'm like, we're going to Socrative. And I point to the chart and they go there, because it doesn't change. Your room number is static. If you get the paid version, you can have multiple rooms. I never found the need for multiple rooms. They gave me a pro version for a while. I still kept using 6867. So with peer grade, different than Socrative, with peer grade, students hand in their work. And we've used this for longer essays. We used it last week when they were writing their argument essays. Before they do that, I do set up an assignment, and I do set up a rubric, and I do set up a checklist of like, these are the things that you need to know. And it's going to ask them things like, does their paper have a claim? Does their paper have at least 3 pieces of evidence? Does their paper have solid reasoning? Does their paper have whatever it is that's on your rubric that you want to ask about? And then their paper gets sent anonymously to 3 peers, and you can change that number. If it's a short piece of writing, I'll make the number higher. If it's a long piece of writing, I'll make the number shorter or number smaller, just because it takes them longer. The first time I tried this with kids, I was like, hey, we got 10 minutes at the end of the day. Let's give it a shot. 10 minutes is not enough. You need a full period for this. I need a whole 45 minutes to an hour to get this done. By the time kids submit their work carefully, and they do carefully review the 3 that they get to review. And then they review the feedback they got. And then they have some time to work on their own revisions. And you want to give them time at the end of the period to work on their own revisions, because it's like strike while the iron's hot, right? As soon as they get that feedback, they're anxious to immediately start going in and like changing some things. I, the teacher, get an overview. This is sort of what it looks like to kids. What advice does your classmate provide about how others can support this social group? Is this clearly stated at the end of the paper? So this person's giving feedback. This person's giving feedback. I get a draft page that looks like this. I can tell who's not submitted. I can tell who's giving feedback. I can tell who's reacting to feedback, and I can tell who's done. And when I do this virtually, I just tend to put them in their own individual breakout rooms, and I'll go visit the kids who are done and say, did you get any good feedback? Really? Oh, that sounds great. Like, I know they did, right? So you have something to work on right now. They're like, oh yeah, I got to make some changes, right? I can look at the results page. I don't think I have a screenshot of that for you. The results page will show me by kid who said what to who. So Johnny said this to Susie, right? Ryan said this to Rashad. I can tell exactly who said what to each child. They can't. They have no idea who gave them the feedback, and they have no idea whose paper they reviewed, unless for something there's something identifying in the paper. So if there's something in the paper that has the student's name on it, obviously they'll be able to tell. But we usually try and do it as anonymously as possible. All right. Any questions about peer grade before I move on? Yeah, to move them forward if they do not have the assignment. Yeah, so if they haven't submitted it, you can just move them right into giving feedback. I tend to segregate my class on this one. I tend to look through their drafts ahead of time, because I can use that sort of preview button in Google Drive and look through their papers. And I'll sort of make a list of, I have a fabulous co-teacher. I'm like, these are 3 kids who should really go work with Danielle and get some more help writing their paper. Like, they just don't have enough written yet. And then I'll have the kids who haven't written enough, but I know they would benefit from seeing the work of other students. So they'll go into the feedback mix. And then I have the kids who have written enough to do feedback. So I kind of make 3 different categories and make decisions. And one kid who was out of the country for 2 days last week, missed a lot of our writing time. He said, I feel really bad that I was in there because I'd only written 1 paragraph. And I said, yeah, Gabe, but I put you in there because I knew you needed to see the work that other people were doing. He said, yeah, that was really helpful. I said, I know that was helpful. That's why I put you there, right? So that was the right thing for him. But for another student, the right thing was more teacher support. And so that's sort of a differentiation piece for me. And the other beautiful thing about peer grade is once you launch them and they get started, they don't really need you much, especially when it's not virtual, if you're doing it live in the classroom, which would allow me as a single teacher even to sit down and work with a child who needed more help just on their writing. So that's pretty fun. All right. Writing groups. I am a fellow with the San Diego Area Writing Project. I don't do as much with them as I wish I did, but I still technically a fellow. And while I went through that internship or that summer institute, that's the word I'm looking for. They do a writing project group procedure with adults. I modified it for children. So these are my steps on that. The part about the writer remaining silent while the group discusses your draft. I have not tried to do this in virtual learning. I'm going to come clean there. A Zoom group of kids trying to share their writing, just I knew was going to be a bunch of blank screens and a bunch of mics turned off, and I didn't want to. I've been relying on peer grade during virtual learning, and that's been okay. Usually I spend a few weeks introducing writing groups, and we do writing groups for first semester, and then second semester I start to use peer grade a little bit once they're already comfortable giving verbal feedback. But I'm out kind of thinking next year of flipping that, starting with peer grade and then moving into face-to-face. So we'll see how that goes. Always learning. All right. Can we teach students to give effective feedback? Yes. Do they automatically give effective feedback? No. You have to teach this. You have to absolutely teach it. It helps to practice with the work of a previous student. So you give everybody a piece of student work and say, you know, what's working, what's not working, what advice do we have for this student? Giving checklists, using a protocol, teaching them to be kind, direct, specific, focusing on the work, start with I. Kids have a lot of hidden advice. They have a lot of secret advice. They're like, well, I wanted to tell them this, but I was afraid it would be embarrassing. Or I wanted to tell them this, but I was afraid that, you know, like there's all this social pressure around being a high school student anyway. If you are the one who provides a lot of critical feedback, that could have repercussions later on in your day. I'm not a fool about that. So we talk about the idea of secret advice or secret feedback and what that means, right? So peer grade does not require student accounts. It does require them to, well, I'm not sure now. I'm not sure about that. It might. It does require me to create a class. So I have a peer grade class and they join my class, and my students have district Google accounts. So they just click sign in with Google. And as soon as they click the single sign in with Google, they're into the peer grade class and I don't have to worry about anything else. I haven't had to consider that account, that specific question, so I don't know the exact answer. But we can go look at peer grade and find out. Just stick around. All right, so charts, I do love charts. I haven't made a chart in almost a year now. It's kind of, I have, my fingers are itching. But I couldn't always archive my charts. So I use my phone, but you know, if you're trying to find a chart that you took a picture of 6 years ago, is it really going to show up on your phone? So I created this blog and I emailed the pictures from my phone to the blog, and now I have them all in one place, and you have them all too, because you can go to classroomcharts.blogspot.com and see any chart that I ever made in my classroom. And there's one of these as a link to this one. How does this work? Links behind my head. How does this work? That one links to a blog post about how to do it if you want to set up your own. My classroom was almost entirely paperless, except I was saving these wads of charts. And when I kept saving these wads of charts, I'm like, why am I saving the wads of charts? Well, it wasn't because I was going to put the same chart back up because I knew they're kind of trashed. It was because I might need it to make another one like it, which meant I should just take a picture of it and throw it away, right? Recycle it. A lot of charts got recycled the day I figured out how to do this. And now they all get recycled, and I take a picture. And if I want my theme chart, oops, I forgot I can't click on that. If I want my theme chart, come to the blog, I click on it, I grab the URL for it. I can put that URL on any other media I want. And if I want to just remake the chart, I'll pull it up on my computer, get out my chart paper, remake the chart, hang it up in the classroom. So don't say them very often. All right, let's talk about teacher feedback, because that is the thing we do spend most of our time doing. And it is the thing that we feel guilty when we don't do enough of. And it is probably the one thing that's like, as teachers, we're kind of like struggling with, especially when things get digital. Because if you're someone who's used to doing things on paper and suddenly things are digital, then I'm probably not talking to any of you who are here now, because this is QLA and it tends to be those Saturday teachers who are already kind of adept at using technology, but I know you have colleagues. So this is for you to take back to your colleagues. Some of these simple suggestions, you can say, hey, I heard Jen talk on Saturday and she said we should try this. So maybe we should, So number one, you cannot give your contractor feedback on your kitchen when it looks like this, right? You can't walk into your brand new kitchen and say, I don't like the tile, right? That's not going to change. You're going to live with that tile for a long time, right? You have to talk to your contractor when your kitchen looks like this, or when your kitchen looks like that, right? Those are the times to make decisions and give feedback and say, could we move this 6 inches further this way before everything is locked down and tightened up? And it's the same with kids. We want to give them feedback early and often, way before it gets to the point of grading. Feedback with a grade is less valuable to kids. They ignore the feedback and they just look at the grade, right? Feedback before they ever get a grade is something they're actually going to act on. They're going to, if you can get them to look at your feedback before they turn in the work, they're much more likely to actually do something with that feedback. Yeah, because once you grade it, the grade becomes more important than the work, right? They are no longer interested in your feedback. They're, even if you tell them you can revise it and turn it in again, they still don't care. They're like, I got a B, I'm okay, right? That's not going to make anybody a better writer. All right, so suggested edits. Now, again, I know this QLA audience probably already knows this, but remind your colleagues. Your colleagues don't know this. They know that when a kid turns something in Google Classroom, that it defaults to suggested edits, but they don't know that they can turn on suggested edits at any time in any Google Doc that students are working on, right? They don't know that they can go up there right underneath that share button and click that drop-down menu and switch to suggesting and start to leave kids suggestions in their documents before the student turns it in Google Classroom. They don't know that they can give that feedback early. So show them that. Show them they can give feedback early. All right, so the tricky thing about suggested edits for me has been teaching students how to use them, because students, they either click this checkbox, or sorry, let me put it this way. They see my suggested edit and they want it to go away. They're like, I'm done with that edit. I want it to go away. They click the X to make it go away. They don't realize that if they click the check, it's going to accept the edit and make it part of their paper, right? They have no idea. So I actually have to pull this up and show students, look, if you like what I did, if you like that I changed there to there, please click the check mark, because what they're doing is they're deleting my comment and then going and making the change themselves. And that's causing them to take longer to do it. So you have to actually teach students how to make and accept changes with suggested edits. All right, Pro Keys. Who are my Pro Keys users in the group? Raise your hand. Do we have Zoom reactions? Pro Keys, anyone? Any fans? Okay, well, your worlds are about to change. You spend a lot of time typing comments to kids? Yeah, You ever type the same comment more than once? Yeah, okay. Well, these are all types of comments I type to kids. And this is what happens when I type to reply, shift space. Please remember to reply to two of your classmates when we have discussion questions like this. Tag. Remember to reply to your classmates using the tag protocol. Tell them something you think, ask a question, give a suggestion, right? So I don't type those things anymore. When I'm grading discussion questions in Canvas and I find those kids who still haven't figured out that they need to reply to two of their classmates, I just hit to reply and then shift and space, and Pro Keys turns it into that. But I set that up myself, and it did take me 30 seconds to set it up. 30 seconds to make the snippet is what Pro Keys calls these. I have snippets for all kinds of things, but you have to make them yourself because that's the only way they make sense to you, right? So right now I have a snippet called ethos. I type ethos and it says, remember when you submit your assignment that you have to write the caption about how you used ethos, pathos, and logos in your answer, right? I don't have to type that anymore. It just does it for me. A lot of kids forget to do that. It's a normal thing. They forget to submit the comment with their work. Like, now I have an easy way to tell them that, right? So Pro Keys will save you much hours. It works in Google Docs comments. It doesn't work in docs themselves. It works in the Google Docs comments. It works in the comment box in Google Classroom. It works in the comment box in Canvas, which is what this example is. It works in your web-based email. So when I write, you write those parent emails, and at the end of the email, you always write, thank you very much. If you have any further questions, please reach out. I'm always happy to help. You write that over and over and over again to parents. I just type close, shift space, and it types it for me, right? So anything that you type repetitively helps. Now, Google Classroom has a comment bank. This is better. it works in more places, and it allows me to have all these files. So these are, every time I grade their Cask of Amontillado essays, I have a specific set of comments I use. Those are all in there. If I type thesis, it says, you probably haven't added your thesis. If I type Montresor, it says, remember that Montresor's name is spelled this way, or remember that Amontillado is not one of the characters, right? It has all that saved for me. And I can build on it over time and reuse it. So huge amount of time saver. I'm able to give my students a lot more feedback in a lot less time. It's worth finding a little time to play with. The catch is that as you grade an assignment for the first time, you're going to kind of keep building your comment bank, and that's going to slow you down a little bit at first. And the next time you grade a similar assignment, you're going to move much faster. It helps to sometimes have your ProKeys page open next to you and review that before you go into the grading, because then you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I have one called caps that reminds me that, that I use when they didn't capitalize things correctly. So whatever you need, whatever works for you. All right. This one scares teachers because screencasting feedback to kids seems like a really time-consuming thing to do. And it can be. You would never screencast all your feedback to every student on every assignment. You might screencast some feedback to some students on some assignments. Think particularly of your kids who might have learning differences. Think particularly of your kids who might be very high or very low in the scale of what's going on in your class. Those are the students who most need screencasted feedback. They most need to hear your voice. They're not the kid who just did a few things wrong and needs a couple comments. They're either a kid who's like ready to be pushed a lot further, or really needs kind of like a lesson in the form of a mini screencast customized to them. So when I see a paper that has a lot of work to do, it's easier for me to turn on Screencastify and just say, hey, John, I'm reading through your paper. I'm noticing that your claim says this, and I think you missed part of the prompt because the prompt said this. And if we changed your claim just a little bit more, and I give him some verbal feedback about what he should do differently, that's a lot different than me typing it out for him, right? I'm still leaving it up to him to make that choice. I drop a link to my feedback. It goes just to him. The Screencastify gives me a quick shareable link. Put that in a comment and say, watch this. And then I check in with the kid during class and say, did you watch my feedback? Right. So this isn't, when I say screencaster feedback, it's not everybody all the time. It's once in a while when you really specifically need it. It's also really great for things that don't have any kind of comment feature on them. With my graduate students, they make Google Sites. You might have your students making Google Sites. And so I screencast my feedback to them about their Google Sites because there's no other way for me to give them feedback on a Google site. And so I can say, this is what it's looking like on my end. You can see these slides aren't visible. They can see what I'm seeing. They can hear my feedback. They hear the positive tone in my voice. They hear that I'm there to help them. It comes across better, and it doesn't take long. It can be a 60-second screencast. A Loom is another good option. Screencastify and Loom are my two favorite tools for this at the moment. All right. One student per room in breakout rooms. I've heard from a lot of teachers that they're not allowed to use breakout rooms because kids can't be in a room by themselves or they can't be unsupervised. Fortunately, my district has not adopted that plan. So we do put kids in small groups in breakout rooms, but also you can put kids in breakout rooms alone. Like they can go to one room. And I got onto this idea one day when I was eavesdropping on my son's math class, and they were supposed to be working on a math sort of assessment thing. Meanwhile, the teacher is kind of yelling at kids like, what, are you in yet? Did you get in? Oh wait, you need to click this. Can you share your screen with me? Like she's verbally giving tech support to all of these children who are not able to do the assessment. Meanwhile, my kid's trying to focus on doing the assessment. And I'm kind of like, couldn't he just have a quiet space he could go to, right? He can't leave the Zoom. So what I do is I just put every kid in their own private breakout room. You can have 50 of them. They're free. And so if you put them all in their own breakout room, you can join any one of them, and they have an ask for help button. So my co-teacher and I do this a lot, put kids in individual rooms, go visit them. And while we're visiting them, we can give them feedback. We can give them feedback that we wouldn't necessarily say in front of the whole class too. And we can go through their Google Docs or whatever it is they're working on, see how they're doing and see which rooms we need to go visit. Right? After a while, you know your kids, you know who you need to check on, and you know who's going to be fine without you. Right? All right, Bitmojis. Kids love the Bitmojis. I started doing this because my students were doing a project where they had to get a proposal approved. And I'm looking at the thumbnails of all the proposals and I can't remember which ones I've approved and which ones I haven't. So I decided that to help myself, I made, hi, keep working on this. Oh, you're so close, and approved. Approved was an actual Bitmoji. These two I had to kind of fake. So now I had, I could drop that image onto their document based on what their progress was. And I could tell whether they still needed me or whether they were ready to move forward on their project. But it turns out they really liked it. They got super excited. It was like putting stickers on things. So if you're not using your Bitmoji that way to give feedback to kids and that kind of thing, you should try it. And the way I do this logistically is instead of trying to use the Bitmoji Chrome extension, which is I think even blocked in my district, I just take all my favorite Bitmojis for feedback and I put them on a Google slide and I keep that slide open and then I can copy and paste them. So that's a lot faster for me. Do I ever use Mote? I have not been a big fan of Mote because if the kids don't have the Mote extension installed, it doesn't play the verbal feedback quite the way it should. And also it would be like a verbal comment, a verbal comment, a verbal comment. It's like 5 separate verbal comments. I'd rather just make one screencast, give them one link. Does that make sense? It's kind of my personal preference. I know a lot of people who love Mote. Mote is a Chrome extension that you can put on that works in Google Docs and allows users to leave voice comments in Google Docs. So it's just about what's working better for you and your students. If I was in the classroom with my kids and I could go around and literally touch every one of their Chromebooks and make sure that they all had the extension installed, I might be more willing to try it and play with it. But at a distance, it wasn't going to be something that worked for me. So I do the screencasting thing. All right, you ever use forms? This isn't a feedback trick. This is actually just a grading trick. If you want to look at student work in a spreadsheet, grade vertically. Just go down vertically. It's a lot easier than going horizontally. In case you, and I figured that out somewhere around 2010. But if you're new to using forms with kids and you're still trying to grade all their work going across, that can be hard. Grade vertically. And the other thing is when something's wrong, you just mark it in bold, because Control B is a lot easier than color coding things. I used to color code. I used to be like, that's a good answer. I'm going to mark it green. And I'd click the cell and I'd click the paint bucket and I'd click green. And then I'm like, that's a not good answer. I click the cell and I'd click the paint bucket and I'd pick red, and that was time consuming. And finally I figured out I just needed a faster way to do that. And my faster way was Control B for bold. And I don't grade everything. Okay, 5-minute sheets tutorial. Anybody have spreadsheet phobias, spreadsheet issues? Know somebody with spreadsheet issues? All right. So this is something I made for my graduate students, but it turned out to be helpful to lots of teachers. Grade vertically. So what I mean by grade vertically is when I'm looking at this spreadsheet and I'm trying to decide if their answer to number 5 is a good answer or not, I'll look at this one, the row 7, and then row 6, and then row 8, and then row 9, and then row 10, and then row 11. I'll grade just that question, right? I'll evaluate just that question. And then I'll evaluate just question 6. And then what I'll do when I'm all done, if I really want to grade it, if I really want to put a number on it, is then I'll look across and be like, oh, that kid has 3 bold answers out of 6. So they get 3 out of 6. They have 2 bold answers out of 6. So they get 4 out of 6 or whatever it is. So yes, the reports come horizontally, but if you need to grade short answer written responses, sometimes it helps to go vertically. Keeps your head in that one question that you're looking at. Spreadsheets are amazing. I should do a session just on all the different ways. Actually, I do. I have a session on like exactly all the ways I use spreadsheets, because there's about 12 different ways I use spreadsheets to make my life easier teaching English. All right, so the sheets tutorial, I find a lot of teachers are reluctant to use spreadsheets because they are so awesome. But they're also kind of intimidating. I personally still have some PTSD around, no, that's not fair to people who actually have real PTSD. I'm actually still kind of afraid of Excel. It scares me a little bit. But I can do Google Sheets. Google Sheets works for me, and I had to learn to use it because I loved Google Forms so much. So for my graduate students, I made this spreadsheet. It's bit.ly EDUC Sheets. EDUC is capitalized, the Sheets is lowercase. And what it does is on 5 different tabs across the bottom, it teaches you how to split names, freeze and add rows, conditional formatting, wrap and resize columns, and hide and unhide. So those are like 5 things I think teachers have to be able to know how to do to be functional with spreadsheets. So when your students submit something and all of their names are like this, but you want to be able to sort by last name, how do you do that? You can do it. There's a simple way to do it. In fact, the directions are right here. And it teaches you how to do that on the first tab. And then you go to the second tab and it teaches you how to freeze and add rows. You go to the third tab, it teaches you conditional formatting. So as you work your way through this spreadsheet, it teaches you the things you need to know about spreadsheets that you can then apply to your own spreadsheets. So take that, share it with your colleagues. It'll help them learn to use spreadsheets. And then you won't have to help them quite so much. Hiding and unhiding is super important. Being able to get the information you don't need out of your way, but not completely lose it, important. All right, Google Forms now has a built-in feedback option. You can add answer feedback to a Google form as you're writing a question, and you can enter what the feedback is. You can even add a video or a link to that feedback as well. So if a student's getting an answer wrong, you can immediately tell them that they're getting it wrong and help them get it right. All right. Do you know how to preview docs in Google Drive? Let's find out. This is a GIF that's, okay, so you pick one Google document, click the eyeball, and then it starts allowing you to use the arrow keys to flip through your students' Google Docs. So you can figure out who needs your feedback faster by using the preview button in Google Drive. So Vicky is a fan, great job. I had a feeling you'd be a fan, Vicky, right? So if you don't know how to use the preview feature in Google Drive, that will save you a lot of time. You don't have to open each doc, like open the doc. Oh, this kid's fine, close the doc. Open the next doc, this kid's fine, close the doc. With preview, you can go through quickly and see who does and does not need your support. Okay, good. Thank you, Rita, you just made my day. Okay, good. So it is a huge time saver. It does allow me to look and see, sort of get the status of my class really quickly. There's a button up here that says open with Google Docs. When I find a student's document that needs my feedback, I'll click that open button and then go right back to previewing. And what will happen is, because my priority is to see everyone. And so by seeing everyone and just opening them when I see someone who needs feedback, by the time I'm done previewing everyone, I've got 5 or 6 docs open that really need my time, right? And now I'm going to spend my time giving feedback to just those 5 or 6 kids instead of getting bogged down on just the first one. I want to make sure I've seen everyone. Maybe the kid who needs my feedback the most is at the end of the alphabet. They're at the end of my Google Drive folder. I want to make sure I see everyone before I start giving anyone specific feedback. So the preview button, huge. All right, whole class feedback. How are we doing? You all with me still? What time am I supposed to be done? Probably in 7, 8, 12 minutes, something like that. 2 o'clock. Okay.
At 1 o'clock.
Okay. So whole class feedback. If you're just joining us, Fabulous Feedback Faster, Bitly is the join page. So when your kids do fill out a Google form, which, by the way, have you heard the fantastic news about Google Forms? About 6 months from now, end of Q2, Google says, because Google speaks in quarters, year annual quarters. By the end of Q2, Google expects that students in G Suite domains will be able to start working on a Google form, close that form, and come back to it anytime within 30 days and continue working, right? Well, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it is okay. Well, we're coming to the end of February. It's really only like 4 months. So 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, something like that, right? They're looking for districts right now who want to be part of the beta test of this. I tried to sign up. They said, you're not in charge of your district Google domain. I said, well, I should be, right? I wish I was. So if you know somebody who is in charge of your district's Google domain, you could sign up now. You could get them to sign up now and be part of the beta. So yes, saving work in a Google form and returning to it later is something you can expect to be able to use with your students in the fall. I'm super excited about that. Also, rich text formatting in Google Classroom. To be able to write a Google Classroom assignment and put bullets in it and bold things. My students need bold a lot. They really need bold. I've been defaulting to all caps for things that I would otherwise bold, but yeah, so super exciting. All right, so your students have done a Google form. 30%, 37% of them are getting the right answer. So this is worth pulling this up in class and saying, okay, this is how you're doing, showing the whole class. right? I know I got distracted with all the new Google announcements this week. Right, so let's talk about this question. Let's talk about why this answer is better than that answer, right? And then they're doing better on this one, so we're going to spend less time on it. So being able to, this is anonymous, right? There's no names on it, but you can pull it up in front of the class and talk about who got it right, who got it wrong, why they got it right, why they got it wrong, not who, but what was right or wrong about it. So whole class feedback with a Google Forms responses page. Also Pear Deck, great for whole class feedback, great for some self-reflection, right? How well do you think you can identify claims and evidence? Well, I don't know, let's find out, right? Very well, almost there, not well, not at all, right? Now I've got some feedback as a teacher as to who thinks they got this and who thinks they don't. Right. And then I see that those results on the Pear Deck teacher dashboard. In this case, they were feeling pretty good about it. So that was a nice one to screenshot. If you're not using Pear Deck in distance and virtual learning, it's worth the learning curve. I vouch for that one. I was a big Pear Deck resistor. I will admit to that. I didn't see any point to use it. I didn't use it in the regular classroom. I wasn't someone who taught from slides very often. I have a preference for Pear Deck, but I also don't have very much experience with Nearpod. So I can't fairly malign Nearpod because I really don't know. All I know is that my district bought a license for Pear Deck, and that's the one I've been living with and using almost daily since then, because it's super helpful to see which of my students are with me and which my students are not. It tells you right away which students aren't responding. That's at the bottom of your list. It tells you right away how they're doing. And so there's a 3-month premium license on it, the 3 months of pro that you can get with Pear Deck. If you don't have a link for that, hit me up. I will give it to you. Because I got that one too. Otherwise, Pear Deck gives you 30 days of premium. And the nice thing, the only really nice feature about premium that's different than the free version is the draggables, the ability to put a dot on the screen and say, drag this to how you're feeling today. Or I did a 4 corners activity with my students Friday, is that just yesterday? Where they would, like, I'd put a question on the screen and in the corners was agree, strongly, disagree, strongly disagree. And they would drag their dot to where they felt about that issue. And that was kind of fun. So there's that. We had them drag a thumbs down to the error in this paragraph. Like, this paragraph had a major problem with it. And we gave them the opportunity to drag their thumb, they had a little red thumb, drag it to the bottom, drag it to the mistake, because we wanted to see if they knew where the mistake was, right? Can you tell me that, can they tell that the claim uses repetition, but then later on the author introduces hyperbole as another claim, right? We wanted to see if they would recognize that that's 2 things going on. And they did. They were all able to drag their thumbs down to that hyperbole word. We can ask them things like, which pieces of evidence would work in a paragraph that makes the following claim? So we'd give them a claim, and then we'd give them 3 pieces of text from the book and say, which one do you think would go best with this claim? So we could help them get better at identifying evidence that would actually prove a claim. If that doesn't sound a lot like an SBAC question, then maybe you haven't been reading the SBAC lately either. If you want the whole thing of this, it was actually the Pear Deck that I was just showing you some slides from. That was from my student teacher, Ms. Romansky. So shout out to her, and follow her on Twitter. She's a fantastic new baby teacher. I didn't call her baby teacher, did I? Oh, sorry, slang in my head coming out my mouth. She's fantastic. She's meant so much to my classroom this year during virtual learning. Students could do self-evaluation in a Google form. Now, if you're using Google Classroom, if you're using Canvas, there are self-evaluation tools built into those as well. But if you just need to do something quick and dirty in a Google form, screenshot your rubric. Like in this case, my rubric was a spreadsheet. And then underneath that, you insert a multiple choice grid question. And the multiple choice grid question is mimics the rubric. And kids are really good at this. They accurately mark themselves with this. And I do have to teach them on their Chromebooks that they can like pinch and zoom to read the rubric a little better if it's too small. Here's a quick reading assessment we did with kids. We asked them to first self-evaluate. I can read something and write a summary of it without difficulty, no or yes. And then we gave them something to read, and we asked them the same kinds of questions. So this one was tone, this one was tone, this one was audience, this one was audience. So we've asked them to first self-assess themselves on a skill, and then we actually tested them on that skill at the same time. And then we shared that with them. Like, we were able to say, like, you didn't think you'd be able to do this, but then you got the question right. Or you did think, you thought you'd be able to do this, and then you got the question wrong. So we're able to talk to them about their own perceptions of their skills versus their actual performance of their skills. All right, let's talk about some automatic feedback options in 5 minutes or less. Autocrat, how well do you know your parts of speech? If you are on my slides, if you've been to Fabulous Feedback Faster, there is a parts of speech review. It will send you an email, find out how well you know your parts of speech. This one's a little bit technically challenging. It does use a tool called Autocrat. Autocrat is an add-on for Sheets that works with forms. When your kids submit the form, it sends them a kind of like a mail merge version of a template you set up with their answers in it. So I made a version of that with parts of speech. You can play with it if you want to. Yeah, the being able to move from student pace to teacher pace back and forth in Pear Deck is really cool. Yeah, Autocrat is awesome. Autocrat's a little, I always find Autocrat to be just a little bit unuser friendly, but it's worth kind of playing with sometimes for certain things. So this is the one I gave my students for fun at the beginning of school. I had them fill out I told them it was an assessment. I said, we're going to find out if you know your parts of speech, because this is 9th grade English. And if you don't know your parts of speech, we got to start with that. So I gave them the parts of speech Google form, and then that populated this story, fake story about their first day on campus, which was funny because they weren't actually going to campus. So they got to tell the story of their first day on campus without realizing it. Sort of like turned it into a Mad Libs kind of situation. So that was fun. All right, looks a little bit like this. The user interface for Autocrat hasn't changed in years, but it is really useful to be able to share docs and send emails to kids. So they fill out a form, they get a doc. There's some other cool things you can do with that too. All right, Hemingway. Hemingway students paste in their writing, and it tells them how they're doing. So they get an immediate sort of color-coded feedback of like which parts of their writing are good and which parts of their writing need attention. So I make them paste in their writing to this before they turn it into me, so that they get a sense right there. And it's AI telling them what they need to fix before I have to tell them what to fix. Quizzes. If you haven't played quizzes with kids, I recommend it better than Kahoot. Kahoot puts the question and the answer on the teacher screen, which I think is unfair to kids who have vision issues. I like quizzes because it puts the question and the answer on the kid's screen, and it changes it. Instead of me having to run it as a teacher pace thing, it's running at their pace. So kids who need more time or kids who need less time have what they need. And I am free to roam the room because they're all getting different questions all at the same time, which means if I give them a 20 question quizzes, I just bought myself 10 minutes of free time to do what I need to do, which is usually to help a kid. That's kind of where that goes. So I like quizzes for that reason, because it's a little more independent and it frees me up to help people. Oh, I get the nice performance summary. We'll look at the results together. If you're familiar with the Edu protocol, the fast and the curious, that relies on quizzes. Super cool. Edpuzzle, questions embedded in videos. If you're distance learning teaching and you're using videos in your teaching and you're not using Edpuzzle, you might want to try it. Edpuzzle is truly a favorite of mine as well, and it's searchable. Like, you want to teach about the Electoral College, somebody already made one for that. Save my bacon every year, every time there's an election. So these little green question marks here at the bottom, each of those is a point where the video is going to stop and the kids get to ask a question. Pro tip, don't put that many questions on your videos, like 5 or 6 most would be good. I went way overkill. Formative, fantastic tool. If you're familiar with Formative, great. If you're not familiar with Formative, it does, it looks like this when I get the results back. I can sort it. I can tell right away who's getting questions wrong, who's getting questions right, and it's in real time. So if they change their answer from A to B, the color of their square changes in that moment. I can watch it happen. So I can tell right away how kids are doing and provide insight and feedback and support immediately. All right, and that's it. That is my official last slide. There we go, 2 o'clock, 1:59, 1 minute to spare. Please feel free to keep asking questions. I'm on Twitter at JenRoberts1. I take questions anytime. Formative there is a free version of Formative. That's what I'm using. It seems to work great. Formative does require me to set up a class and probably does require kids to like sign in with Google or something like that, because it needs to know who they are.